Okay,
Oh,
thank you, San. I'll start. Ma'am, we can start now.
okay.
Okay, sir. Hello everyone, and welcome to DevTalks. I'm Dipayan Das, and I'm excited to be your host today on behalf of the GNU Linux Users Group at NIT Durgapur. Brace yourselves for an insightful session with our esteemed guest, Mrs. Shrutirupa Banerjee. She is a senior security researcher at Quickheal and a recognized Google developer expert in web technologies. Today's talk promises an insightful discussion, so stay tuned for a valuable and engaging conversation. Ma'am, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Dipayan, and thank you so much for the entire team for having me here. I'm really very happy to be here. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. It's our honor to have you with us. So before I move on into something, would you be so gracious as to walk us through your current responsibilities and experiences at Quickhill, giving our viewers a valuable glimpse into your role?
Yes, of course. So, see, from the very beginning, I have been always very much inclined towards doing some research based work. So I was always looking for an opportunity where I could do some more research, and I have been always exploring various domains of cybersecurity. And this is where I actually got an opportunity to, analyze malicious samples. So I got an opportunity to be a malware analyst or malware researcher over here. So my role is not just to analyze the malware samples, but also analyze the complete attack chain from the very beginning. How is the attack happening? Which groups are actually involved? Sometimes we take actions against them. Actions as in like we generally add detections on them, on the samples, or we let the other teams know about it. So everyone is actually working together. So one team, if actually analyzing the malicious samples, the other team is working on understanding the complete attack chain till it finds the final infection that is happening. So most of the times we prefer to do some analysis on malicious samples, the malicious network through which they are actually sending the samples or sharing the samples and performing the infection. So we add detections to them, both at the file, as a file based detection that we are adding. Another that we are trying to add is based on web, another on the network as well. So these are some of the things that we follow. Apart from that, we have our own research also. We look for recent malware trends that are happening, which kind of malware are most prevalent. So we do research on that. We sometimes perform complete analysis. So we have our researches or research papers or blogs on the same, and hence we also add detection on those samples as well.
That's amazing, man. That's great to hear from you. How you have just amazingly explained the whole thing. Now, additionally, being recognized as a Google developer expert in web technologies is an impressive feat. What does it mean to you, and how has it influenced your career?
So, if you have noticed my career path, I started from blockchain technology and gradually shifted to web application penetration testing. So, this was one field where I was slightly involved into web application vulnerability assessment or penetration testing. And from there, I really got an opportunity from a person who was in who I think who is still in Google, who asked me to apply for the role, and I did. So there were plenty of there were, I think, two or three interviews that happened, and by God's grace I got the opportunity to be a Google developers expert on web technologies. So it has helped me not only understanding the offensive part, like most of the time I would always be performing attacks, understanding vulnerabilities from a web applications perspective, but Google's developer expert gave me a chance to understand from developers perspective as well. So my role and my intention became to bridge the gap between the developers and security professionals, because both the things go hand in hand. So if the security professionals can explain the consequences of any vulnerable application to the developers in a better way, then the developers would also be writing the code or developing the code in the better way as well. So that has actually influenced me into, turning my goal into bridging the gap between the developers and the security professionals.
Okay, ma'am. Like you have just mentioned about the developer's perspective towards this cybersecurity domain or towards this security professionals. So how it should be like? How it should be like an ideal case?
So, in an ideal case, I would give you an example. So, for example, there is a login page where you have to just enter your name and the password. So, in password, you can put anything, but in name, there has to be just characters. Nobody's name is in special characters or numbers. So whenever a developer is developing such application, that person should always put some validation that no special characters or no numbers are being put. So as a result, uh, what an attacker does is basically they look for how is the server behaving. So if you happen to put any special characters in an input field, which you're not supposed to, based on that, you observe how the server is behaving. If the server is behaving in a very abnormal way, that is the thing, and this is the point from where the attackers try to find a vulnerability. So a simple flaw can also turn into a vulnerability, and a vulnerability can always be exploited by not by that attacker at that point of time, but by somebody else as well. So nothing is 100% secure. So we have to make sure that we are validating or taking care at least of the basic things while developing an application.
Okay, ma'am. Like you have just mentioned about it. I want to know one particular thing, that is you are talking about vulnerabilities and exploitations like these. Now, if from a developer's perspective, if I go into that, isn't this the same thing? Like I'll put myself into the attacker's role or into the exploiter role and find the vulnerabilities together and find, like, try to solve all of them hand in hand.
So putting yourself into the attacker's role is something else. That is something that a security analyst would always do. Like their role would be to analyze or hack the entire application, or you must have heard of red teamers. So they would always hack the entire application to get to the root account. So basically this is something that they do. There are professionals who are working on that, and they are trying to break the security in that way. But the developers work is not to do this, not to actually figure out the flaws, but their work is to understand, like for example, or the example that I give right now, like having some proper validation, having some authentication, authorization, these certain things, having some algorithms that you might be using. So you're using a stronger algorithms for that. So that those are the things that the developer can set up from their end. Other Apart from that, the security people are there. If there is any business flaw, they would definitely let them know that your logic is creating such business flaw. Apart from that, basic things could be done from the developers end as well.
That's great, man. That's now, as someone deeply involved in the security landscape, you must have encountered various challenges. Can you shed some light on the evolving threats in the cybersecurity domain, or how developers can stay ahead to ensure the entire security of their applications? Or if I bring this in a simpler way, can we say that total security is a myth?
Security is a myth. Yeah, see, nothing is 100% secure. Whatever you do, everything can be very easily bypassed. So it's for example, so if you have purchased a home, you have all the locks, you have everything, but somehow a thief will anyway figure it out how to enter into your house. So there are always a way to break. And apart from that, these are just technologies, these are just programming languages created by humans. They are just pieces of code which can be easily broken. So I will not say security is completely a myth, but nothing is 100% secure. Now, if you talk about challenges, there are, of course, a lot of challenges that you will see, because even though we have, suppose, put up all the security tools that we require, for example, in our systems, we do have antiviruses, anti malware devices, and a lot of things, lot of protections that they have already implemented into your device. But still, these things happen because people are also not aware that they should not be clicking on any link that they see. Nowadays what happens that new attack scenarios always keep coming into picture. Nowadays a new ransomware attack is happening, which is very much different from the previous ransomware attacks. So we have already taken care of that, but what about the recent ones? So the malware authors or the attacker's point of view is always to break the anti malware analysis tools so that they can infect the system. And a lot of people do not update and upgrade their OS devices, and as a result this also happens. So most of the times we have to make sure that people are also aware while using their devices. So if you want to use technology, be it our parents, grandparents, children, teenagers, anyone, then you have to be slightly aware of the outcome of if you're using any, so for example, if you're using social media, you have to be very careful of what you are sharing, what kind of details are you sharing, which kind of pages are you following, what kind of links are you clicking on. This is something that everyone should be aware of now, should start getting aware of, in fact.
Okay, ma'am. So according to you, awareness is something that can be a great key factor, right?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So now, if I move on, for those in our audience less familiar with WAF, that is Web Application Firewall,
Mhm.
can you tell us how WAF rules contribute effectively towards managing real-time threats, or how WAF stands out as an important tool?
So see, there are a lot of things that happen. I'll give you an example that malware attacks are something where malware are just malicious programs. So whenever they get into your system, they will infect your system. So whatever their goal is, they will either try to steal your information, or maybe their intention is to completely disrupt your device. Now, vulnerability and exploitation, when you talk about this, vulnerability is not, does not necessarily have to be something where users involvement is there. Like, for example, for a malicious file to be executed, most of the time the user has to execute that sample or execute that file. But for vulnerability, it is not necessary for the victim or for the user to execute that application. It happens when there is a flaw, or sorry, vulnerability in that specific application. Okay, so in those cases, what happens is, these vulnerabilities are present in different technologies. For example, for web applications, we have different kinds of vulnerabilities which work according, or that happen according to the language or the technology used. For Android, other kinds of happen. For iOS, other kinds of vulnerabilities happen, and that is the reason we have different kinds of tools. So anti malware tools are something which actually are protecting you from malware, viruses, trojans, etc. Whereas if you talk about WAF, which is web application firewall, it is taking care of the web application vulnerabilities. So it is taking care of, if there is an attacker who is trying to perform an attack against your web application, and there are some critical attacks where user intervention is not at all required. They can directly get access to your system just because of one vulnerability in your application. Sometimes these are chain of attacks as well, but a lot of times these things happen. If you have heard about solar winds attack, so they have a chain of attacks sometimes, and sometimes they are actually exploiting a vulnerability completely. So in those situations you do need web application firewall. So it depends upon your technology that you're using. And web application firewall, WAF, that you have mentioned, there also we happen to write rules so that we can prevent our web applications from those web application based vulnerabilities.
That's great, ma'am. That will definitely help our audience to explore
Mhm.
more about WAF. Now, given your role as an associate security consultant, you performed penetration testing across internal and external networks using various methodologies. So,
Mhm.
what are the few unique approaches that you think are essential during penetration testing and that can rightly drive the overall security of the web application, or I would say the entire network?
So, the very first thing, it is not just specific to vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, but also during malware research or any kind of domain in security that you are trying to. For it is completely based on the offensive side that I'm talking about. So, is enumeration, enumerating an application. This is the first step. Until and unless you know that application, you won't be able to do anything. Second thing that would be is after understanding the application, you need to know which are the input points. Now, what do we mean by input points? Input points could be something like your login page where you have to enter your credentials. The URL could be another input point where you can see IDs are given, some file links are also given, the pages that it is using, the pages that it is loading. So, considering such kind of input points is another step. Once you understand these input points, based on that you also try to understand how is it loading the page, how is it actually analyzing my request, sending my request to the server, and how is the response coming to me. So if I happen to send some gibberish request, how is the response? So you are always, thinking that what if I do something like this, how is the server going to respond? Is it giving me some kind of information? Is it behaving abnormally? These are certain points that always you can ask for. Again, there are few questions that you can always ask yourself, that why is this specific application using this. Then while going through, again you will have to do a lot of research. Like suppose if the URL is something id equal to 1, then you will have to think, why is it using id equal to 2? What if I change id equal to some name? How will it behave? Am I seeing some error? Is the server is not responding properly? If I happen to put some random gibberish, lots of strings over there, how is the server responding? Is it not at all responding? Is the server, has the server hanged over there? So these are some of the ways how you can always start with analyzing an application. So enumeration is always the first part, understanding the input points, and then trying to see that what kind of technology is being used. Even while enumerating, you will get to know the kind of application, technology, platforms, languages that they are using, and based on that also you can perform your analysis later on.
That's indeed great to hear from you, ma'am. Now, allow me to move forward to the most demanded question of the session. That is, with the increasing demand in web technologies and cybersecurity domain, many aspiring developers are keen to understand how to choose a career path similar to yours. What advice do you have for individuals looking to specialize in these fields, and what are the specific key factors that you think are the biggest green checks?
Explore a lot. See, I have always explored a lot. So, if you're starting your career right now, read lots of blogs, articles, whichever technology you're interested in just go through it, see if that is your thing. I have always followed the rule of elimination. So, I'll give you an example. Like, I started my career with blockchain. So, I was very much interested into cryptography. So I started with blockchain research, but gradually I realized that I need to do something more because we don't have much scope over here. At that point of time, I did not have that much scope. So I gradually moved to VAPT, which was really very interesting. But still, I needed to figure out what could be the next step. So I kept on reading blogs. So I read about hardware, IoT hacking. I read few blogs, and it was something, these things were something that I was not interested in. So I eliminated those. So I got very much clear that I am not interested into hardware. Then later on, I moved ahead with WAF. At that point of time, by God's grace, I really got like I have been in those companies where I really got a chance to explore a lot apart from my office hours. Even in this company, apart from my office works, I do get a chance to do research on my other work, where I am actually interested in. So at Qualys also I did that, and I explored a lot of different opportunities. I eliminated, like tried to learn about cloud. I could do some kind of testing on cloud, but that was something that I was not interested in. Later, I came to know about threat intelligence, malware analysis, and that was something which I grew a bit of interest. Then I started learning, and then I realized that this is something that I would like to pursue. Now, if I wanted to get into malware analysis, I had to prove my knowledge and experience. But by that point of time, I did not have an industrial experience. So I had started writing blogs about malware analysis, how you can start analyzing malware. I started showcasing whatever I knew about analyzing a sample. So you will have to start showing to the world as well that you know these things, so that you can apply for those job roles. I started my YouTube channel Cryptoware, from where I malicious samples completely focused on beginners, because at that point of time even I was learning. So I had realized that we need some more videos on such topics which are quite uh, technical, for especially for the beginners. So from that place, from that starting from that place till now, I still consider myself really grateful that I got an opportunity. So in this company I got a chance to enhance my skills, and whatever I tried to learn by myself, I could actually apply it over here. And of course I'm still learning over here. So you can always start with writing blogs, understanding, watching more and more YouTube videos, exploring various topics is really the key. And start eliminating whichever domain you're not interested in. Again, many a times people ask me about certifications as well. Certifications are good, but I personally don't prefer until and unless you are actually learning something out of it. Otherwise, you will just end up spending a lot of money on certifications and you won't learn much. So, to focus completely on learning. So, once you start learning, your earning will keep happening gradually. It will start happening in your life, so you don't have to worry on about it, but keep exploring various domains and opportunities whichever come by your side.
Thank you, ma'am. As you have explained it thoroughly, I would like to point out one particular question that comes always from our audience perspective. That is, how to get started with blockchain technology, and then switch to the actual career path.
So, from for blockchain technology, I would be really honest that I was very much interested in cryptography. So, I wanted to do something, some kind of research in cryptography, and blockchain was the closest thing. Okay, so now if you want to get into blockchain, you need to know some sort of development as well. Also, now the security in blockchain has also improved, like smart contract security. Again, the logic behind remains the same, but the technology is different, so the application or the languages that you have to learn would be slightly different, but the base logic remains the same. You can always start with understanding what blockchain is, how is it working, where is it in fact being used. Now based on that, you can actually get started on the technologies that are being used at that point of time. And I have observed that blockchain development and security has improved a lot in these years. Plus the demand is still quite high, so you can always start look for such roles. There are many startups. Another thing, always it's always better to start your career with a startup, because you get to learn a lot. Of course you'll get a lot of you might be having some job pressure, but you really end up learning a lot before moving on to a big MNC or somewhere.
That's great, ma'am. Now, that was great to hear that from you, ma'am. And now some of our viewers have some questions for you, ma'am. Are you good to go with those?
Sure, no problem.
Uh, like just like Cyan Paul has asked about what is L1 type of blockchain network and how does it works and what is the future of blockchain?
I really have no idea about it because I'm no longer into blockchain. You can ask me
Okay.
anything about malware analysis. I would be really helpful with that.
Okay, well, I'll move into some generic question then.
Sure.
An audience, Sudhi Sundar Datta is asking how to get a career in the field of cybersecurity, particularly in the field of cybersecurity.
Okay, so few things that one must start with: OS internals, Linux, Windows, anything would be fine. But I personally prefer Linux, but you may go ahead with Windows, whichever is more comfortable. Networking is really the key in whichever domain in cybersecurity, even for blockchain. Networking is something that you should know very thoroughly. Like networking, you are going to use it in every uh, subdomains of cybersecurity. Few things that you need to know: some languages. You have to be a programmer instead of being a coder. What do I mean by that is, do not be very much like comfortable with one specific language. Like whenever somebody asks me that, yeah, which language I'm comfortable in, like Python is my language, but if there are other languages, I would not mind, working using that language. So become a programmer, start understanding which language you're comfortable with, but again make sure that you're comfortable enough to go through documentation and then code in any other languages as well. See recent trends, how recent trends are working, which kind of technology is evolving. Even if you see that some of the technologies, for example AI is evolving, but you cannot directly get into AI. So before that you should start from the basics. So again, read a lot of blogs, read articles. Some people say that certifications are quite helpful. Yes, again, they are helpful only if you are learning. So keep learning. Certifications could be secondary, but your work should be able to speak for you. Start writing blogs, articles that you can share amongst your peers, you can share on LinkedIn, so that people can also know that yes, you are trying or exploring different domains, you know something, and then you're good to go. With time you will gradually learn. With industrial experience, you'll get to know that what else is required in your specific domain.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this kind of suggestions and all. As we wrap up our discussion, I would like to express our gratitude to Mrs. Shrutirupa for sharing her insights and expertise with us today. And thank you, ma'am, for giving us your valuable time and being a part of DevTalks. I hope you like this session. And to our viewers, make sure to connect with Shrutirupa, ma'am, on LinkedIn. And thank you everyone who joined us for today's DevTalk session. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. Until next time, happy coding. May the source be with you. This is Dipayan signing off. See you at the next DevTalks. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.